Hello and welcome to lesson 4 of our creative writing scheme. Today's focus is the 5 senses. We're going to think about how the 5 senses are used to develop descriptive and narrative writing. But before we do that, let's get our brains working using this little vocabulary starter. In front of you is a grid. At the top of the grid are some commonplace everyday words. What I'd like you to do is write those words down, and next to them or underneath them, write down words that you would use to replace them in your writing that you might think are better. Have a go at that now. Pause the video if you need to. Welcome back. As you can see from the screen, and as you should have done on your piece of paper in your book, filled in as many alternative words as you could think of for our common words. For example, I've got on the screen there, walk. Instead of that, I might put stroll, pace, saunter, or meander. Again, if you have got words that I don't, that doesn't mean yours are wrong. It does just mean there are lots of words we can use instead of these. If you would like to pause the video at this point and write down any of the words that I do have on the screen now to use later in the lesson, that might be a good idea. Okay, so let's have a little think about those 5 senses. In front of you is an extract about a small town. What we're going to think about is what makes the description good and how does it use the senses. First things first, let's read through it together. It was a town of red brick, or of brick that would have been red if the smoke and ashes had allowed it. But as matters stood, it was a town of unnatural red and black like the painted face of a savage. It was a town of machinery and tall chimneys, out of which interminable serpents of smoke trailed themselves forever and ever, and never got uncoiled. It had a black canal in it, and the river that ran purple with ill-smelling dye, arid vast piles of buildings full of windows, where there was a rattling and trembling all day long, and where the piston of the steam engine worked monotonously up and down like the head of an elephant in a state of melancholy madness. What I'd like you to do is have a look at the bullet pointed text box on the right, and I'd like you to jot down just on your piece of paper or in your books any of those that you can see in our extract. So one might be visual imagery. The colour red is mentioned in the first line. I would write the word red down. Have a go at this now. Pause the video if you need to. Welcome back. So as you can see on the screen, I've colour-coded it to make it just a little bit easier. We've got a number of colours that we should have picked out. Red, black, purple, unnatural red. Then we've got some visual details like things that we can see and the size of them. So things like smoke and ash, town, machinery, tall chimneys, river, canal. It talks about it being vast, which means quite large. It talks about being full of windows, and it talks about a steam engine. These are all things that we can see, and it's helping to, without using a cliche, to paint that picture in the reader's mind so that we can visualise what the narrator is saying. And then we've got sounds like rattling and trembling. We've got scents or things that we should be able to smell, like smoke, ash, ill-smelling. That just means bad. So it means that whatever is in that river, it smells pretty bad. And then I asked you to look for any ambitious vocabulary. I've picked out 3 that I thought were particularly ambitious. We've got interminable, which means endless or apparently endless. We've got monotonous, which means boring, dull and tedious. And then we've got melancholy, which was also used in the starter, which just means extreme sadness or pensive sadness. Again, these are words that you might want to use in your own writing later in this lesson. So this writer has describe this town to us, and we get the idea that because it's full of smoke and machines and the rivers are all black and they smell, it's not a nice place. But we don't get that idea without the added information from our 5 senses. So it's important that we use them. So before we start writing our own piece, let's just have another little look at this extract. And what I want us to think is, how do the 5 senses give us more information than what is being said? So how does using the senses help readers to make inferences? That means like read between the lines and develop their understanding of the story or what is being described. So what I'd like you to think about is, do we get any impression about this town? Do we think it's a nice place to live? If we do or we don't, why do we or don't we? What evidence can we pick out? What time period do we think this is set in? Is there any evidence to demonstrate that? So what I'd like you to do is pause the video again and write down anything that you can pick out or you've inferred or read between the lines and evidence to back that up. Welcome back. There were a few things that I inferred from this. As you can see from the slide, I thought that this description could be a town during the Industrial Revolution. And I thought that because we've got the idea of the smoke and the ashes and not sort of covering the houses and stopping them from being red. We've got the idea of steam engines that were working monotonously. We've got this idea of the pollution in the air and in the rivers, all linking us back to the Industrial Revolution. And then I did think to myself, this place seems pretty dangerous and possibly deadly. We've got that idea of interminable serpent of smoke. So we can see the smoke in the air. That could be deadly for our lungs. It could be something that's quite dangerous and making the people that live there poorly. We've also got the Black Canal, which tells us the water's polluted and possibly dangerous, and ill-smelling dye. So we could infer or get the information that something is going into the rivers from factories or places of work that is making this place more dangerous. All of these inferences and understandings come from the 5 senses that are being used. So what we're going to do now is you're going to have a go at your own description using 5 senses. So as you can see on the screen, we've now got 2 images that you're going to choose from. You could choose the funfair or the slightly airier and contrasting picture of the cabin in the woods. It all depends on what you would prefer to describe. So your task now is to plan your 5 senses and the things that you're going to describe. You don't have to necessarily use every single one of the senses because things like taste may not link to the description. However, if you could use it as being able to taste the tension in the room, exaggerating that's something that you might want to think of a little bit more challenging. So in your plan, you need things you can see, hear, smell, touch, feel or taste. Have a go jotting down some ambitious vocabulary and some language devices like similes, metaphors and personification. So pause the video now and have a go at your plan. Welcome back. You should have all your stuff planned now on your 5 senses and have an idea of the things that you're going to describe. In front of you on the screen is a structure of writing. It's numbered 1 to 7 and it's just the order that I'd like you to attempt structuring your sentences in. Again, you don't have to use this, but it might help you to organise your thoughts and also to improve and consciously structure your sentences rather than all of them being simple sentences or all of them being compound sentences. It just gives us a little bit of variety. So use that structure to help you. If you don't know what any of those are, a little bit like number 7 says, use alliteration. If you can't quite remember what alliteration means, there is a grid with some of the more difficult subject terminology to help you to understand it. If you're not sure about your ambitious vocabulary or you didn't manage to plan very many words or you couldn't think of any, next to each of the images is an arrow pointing at it with some appropriate words for that image, and they're a little bit more high level or things that you might not have thought of yourself. So your last task now is to have a go at writing that at least 7-sentence paragraph using your 5 senses. There is a challenge in purple underneath to have a go at using an oxymoron and a semicolon. Again, if you're not quite sure how to use those, maybe leave that for now, or you could Google it and have a go at using it.